Back in 2016, I did an unboxing review of the Sigma 60mm f2.8 for APS-C, and that lens was actually released originally in 2013, which is 9 years ago. So here we are this year, 9 years later or so. Sigma comes out with a 90mm f2.8, which is effectively the same lens, but now for full frame Sony mirrorless. Now, the only difference is this is way better built and way more expensive. So let's see how this thing comes packaged. It comes in a white box. Inside there is a user manual, the lens, and a couple of plastic lens caps. There's also a nice all-metal lens hood which effectively doubles the overall length of this compact lens. Sigma also includes an all-metal magnetic lens cap, which is a staple of the I-series contemporary line. Now this Sigma is compact and relatively light for being all-metal and glass. It comes in at 292 grams and it feels solid. Construction is just as good as the 20mm that I recently reviewed. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronic connections as this lens has an excellent stepper autofocus motor. There is a little rubber gasket around the mount for dust and moisture resistance, but that is it. No other weather sealing. On the side, there are some lens specs, a silver contemporary C logo, a nice feeling autofocus to manual focus switch, 0 to 1 on the bottom indicating this is a 2021 release. This lens is made in Japan, minimum focusing distances are listed here as well, and in front of all of this is a very nice clicky aperture ring that goes from f2.8 to f22. It is excellent, very well done, it feels premium, and it sounds great as well. In front of the aperture ring is the focus ring. I know I said that the 20mm had the nicest feeling electronic ring I've ever tested, but this one is about 10% better. It's just so smooth, so well damped, perfect feeling. It feels just like a very well done mechanical manual focus ring, but this one is electronic. Finally, around the front there is a pretty flat front lens element. No info on this part of the lens. The design is nice and clean. Mounted on my A7C, I think this lens is great. It's very compact, travel friendly, but adding the lens hood does make it look more substantial. Even by itself, it is a well executed lens that does not even slightly feel cheap or corner cut in any area. Now the question is, how does this lens perform? So I took it with my A7C out and I took a bunch of samples with it. Here they are straight out of the camera with no editing and no post-processing. So the first thing that I noticed is that 90mm is an awesome focal length for portraits. 85mm is that classic portrait focal length, and 90mm is the same. It gives you nice compression, background separation, and a flattering look. Colors wide open on this lens at f2.8 look nice, skin tones are well done, but it's not all fun and games and perfect. One thing I noticed about this lens is that it doesn't focus quite as quickly or accurately as the 20mm I tested earlier. However, it does focus silently. Now the explanation for this is obviously a 90mm focal length means there is a lot more shallow depth of field than a 20mm, even at f2.8, but I expected it to be a little bit snappier. For static subjects, you'll be absolutely fine, but with toddlers who move around, it's not as easy to get a sharp, focused picture. Sharpness wide open is excellent. The center of the frame and the corners are all beautifully sharp. There are no compromises. And that is a byproduct of the lens design, the lens elements, and the fact that this is an f2.8. This is a lens that you don't have to stop down for sharpness. Even though this is a lens you may never use for landscapes, it's good to know that if you did, it would be sharp across the frame. Bokeh is nice and smooth as well. Nothing that I noticed was distracting. Outlines were faint. The center of the frame demonstrated perfect circles, and those circles became cat eyes as you move to the edges and corners. Foreground bokeh is equally as smooth and it looks great. Now as far as distortion, this lens has quite the pincushion distortion with stretched corners. I noticed this because I turned off my in-body lens corrections, but with that setting back on, this is a non-issue. There is, however, a bit of vignetting, not a ton, but a little bit in the corners wide open. Flaring is also a bit of an issue, not as subdued as what I saw on the 20mm even with this huge lens hood attached. Into the sun you get an interesting purple and teal haze and some pretty decent yellow flare as well. It makes for a unique look, although it does wash out the contrast quite a bit. Lastly, chromatic aberration does exist, however it is relatively well controlled as well. It's purple and green at times, but in my samples I didn't see anything overly distracting or concerning. For video work, this lens has very little focus breathing, so if you are doing focus pulls, they will look brilliant. So in summary, this is a well-built, well-finished, and excellent performing lens that's sharp across the frame, wide open, but it does have a little bit of chromatic aberration, some flaring issues, and some vignetting. And I think those are all fine and good because those are really small issues. There's no blatantly obvious, huge, massive problem with this lens in terms of optical performance. The only issue is where does it fit in the competitive landscape. In terms of price, this lens is $639, which is a lot for an f2.8 prime, but not a lot for a well-built all-metal full-frame lens with autofocus. And there are quite a few competitors in this focal length. Sony has an 85mm f1.8 lens that's about $600. Viltrox has one that is $400. Sony also has a 90mm f2.8 macro for $1,100, which is a long-time favorite of mine. And Sigma has their very own amazing 85mm f1.4 art lens for $1,200, which is unbelievable in terms of performance. The reason that I like Sigma lenses so much is because they are optical bargains. In terms of price for performance, there really isn't anything that can beat a good Sigma lens. That's why I have so many of them. But I wouldn't say that this 90mm from Sigma is necessarily a lens bargain. I don't think that it's overpriced, but I think it's just fairly priced. I don't see it as a lens that beats the competition at half the price. Ultimately, I think it would be hard to convince someone with a Sony 85mm f1.8 lens to give up the extra light and spend more money on this 90mm from Sigma. Likewise, I think it would be hard to convince someone who has the Sigma 85mm f1.4 art to give up that f1.4 for an f2.8. The only way this 90mm makes sense is one, if you want a smaller, more portable and travel-friendly lens, or two, you want the all-metal build. And in the end, those are really the only two reasons anyone would ever go out and buy this lens over the other competitors out there. That is the build quality, all metal, and the size, which is ultra compact. And I have to say, that's really the goal with this whole line of lenses from Sigma, so they're doing that right. That is the differentiating factor, or those two factors are what differentiates this lens from the others. But for me personally, I think that the ultimate full-frame portrait lens is this Sigma 85mm f1.4 art. You can see here it's significantly larger than this 90mm. It also weighs quite a bit more, has a whole lot larger front lens element, and costs about twice as much. But this lens has that wow factor that I don't think is present with this 90mm. It's a great performer, but it's not jaw-dropping performance because it's an f2.8. It's good, it's adequate, especially at 90mm, but it just doesn't blow everything out of the water into smithereens, such as what you get with this 85 1.4. So that is my review of the 90mm Sigma DGDN I series. I hope you guys enjoyed it and you learned something from this video. As always, if you guys are interested in reading more about this lens or possibly buying it for yourself, I'll have some links down in the description below, so please check those out. Also, leave me some comments. Comment down below what your favorite 85mm-ish lens is for full frame or APS-C. I don't care. What is your favorite portrait lens? Maybe that's the better question. As always, thank you so much for all of your comments, all of your likes, and your support. Stay tuned for more videos, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.